Hi, my name is William Waterway, and welcome to William Waterway Presents, a MVTV television series that has been running now, well, since the founding of MVTV for over 10 years, but also, too, back in the late days of the 1980s when we had telemedia and interviews with Walter Cronkite, Alfred Eisenstadt, Bill Styron, and many others. And today we have a very distinguished guest, and so appropriate for the timing of the Gay Head Light and its relocation. Our guest today is Wayne Wheeler. He is the founder and president of the United States Lighthouse Society. And I met Wayne shortly after Vineyard Environmental Research Institute received the license from Congress for the 3 lighthouses on the island. And I was in San Francisco, and I tracked down this guy that I've heard about. And many people were referring to Wayne because of his work with lighthouses. He's internationally renowned. So welcome, Wayne Wheeler, and what a time to be here.
Thank you, William, and thank you for the work you're doing with lighthouses here on the island. A very important area of our maritime heritage.
Well, and I like your work so much, and having met you so long ago in the 80s, that is why I asked you to write the introduction to my book, Gay Head Lighthouse, The First Light on Martha's Vineyard.
Well, I appreciate that very much because that was the first lighthouse that I saw as a young lad. I was summering here with my parents.
Yeah.
I think I was about 12 years old, and one day, we had been coming here for years, as much as you can in 12 years, but my father one day said, "Come on, I want to take you up island and show you this lighthouse." Well, I had no idea what a lighthouse was at the time, and we went up there, and I wasn't necessarily impressed. There was a mansard, no, I think it was a Dutch colonial duplex attached to the tower. And we got into the tower, the Coast Guard was there, manning at the time, and climbed the stairs. What really got me was when the young coastie helped me up into the lantern room, and the first order lens was just dazzling in the sun. It was like looking at a galaxy. I was just awestruck by it. So eventually, of course, I started the Lighthouse Society, and
Were you in the Coast Guard first?
I was. After college, you had to do something, and I went into the Coast Guard. You had to go in the military of some sort,
yes.
You know. And so I was always in aids to navigation. I was an officer, went to OCS. We had 4 lighthouses in Alaska that we provided, every 2 weeks, we provided mail, 15 Navy movies, and food. And occasionally I had to go ashore and inspect the stations and perhaps give a test to one of the coasties. So that was 2 years in Alaska, and then I went to the Great Lakes, and I had to inspect lighthouses. It was basically an office job, but the head of the aids to navigation in the Great Lakes. And from there I went to executive officer on a ship that I picked up in Japan. We did some Vietnam work, no lighthouse work there, but eventually when we got back to Honolulu, after a while they shifted my ship to Alaska. I'd already been there, so I went to the base, and I had the Makapu'u Lighthouse that I had to inspect occasionally.
And where was that? Which island?
Oahu.
Oahu.
Okay. It's the only lens in the country that's the only hyper-radial. It's 8.5 feet in diameter, much bigger than a first order. Then I went to headquarters and did Loran, worked on what is now called GPS with the Pentagon.
Was that lighthouse there when we had Pearl Harbor being bombed?
It was.
I'll be damned.
It was built in 1909.
Yeah.
And there's also Makapu'u. I mean, that's Makapu'u. There's also Barbers Point Lighthouse. After that, after 2.5 years in Washington, awful, I went to San Francisco and opened the Vessel Traffic Center. And I did that for a couple of years, and then I resigned my commission. Took a year off, couldn't decide what I wanted to do when I grew up. Did some wood carving and met my wife, figured I better get a job. So I made one phone call and went back with the Coast Guard. in the bridge section, and within a year I was assistant chief aides to navigation back into lighthouses, and we were automating them then, and the vandals were killing us.
Yes.
So our office started to do creative things with lighthouses.
What year was that?
That was in the late 79 and 80.
That's just about right.
We were doing that.
Yes.
We had the called American Youth Hostels at the time. Now it's Hostels International. We put them in 2 lighthouses. We put a Port District personnel in one. We gave one to a, I mean, we licensed one to
Yes.
a nonprofit, Point Arena. And once a year we'll meet with the other districts in Washington or in New York City. And we told them what we were doing, because the vandals were killing us.
They were killing us on Martha's Vineyard. Gayhead Light, the windows were smashed. Eggertown Light, they were smashed. East Chalk Light, they smashed the first floor window. There was the smell of beer and urine. There was broken glass in there. There was graffiti inside on the brick. Gayhead Light suffered the same thing. It was smelly inside. Eggertown Light, they were always breaking the glass.
Yeah.
And you're right, that was a time in history. I don't know why, and the Coast Guard just wanted to get rid of them.
Well, the thing was that even the old lighthouse service always was a very niggardly outfit, and always looking ways to save money. And the Coast
Yes.
Guard is work. Believe me, we had ships 40, 45 years old. We're always cash strapped
You
and
were.
personnel
That's
down.
true.
You know, so one way to do that is to modernize. And you know, every industry, a business, whatever, tries to modernize to save money, to do things more efficiently.
Yes.
So we were removing personnel. We had ships coming along. We needed billets for those ships. And by automating a lighthouse, we could save 3 billets or reprogram 3 billets. And then we would put one at a local base. And that person, along with a few others, would maintain them on a monthly basis.
When you say automate, but we're tearing some down and putting a little steel skeleton tower with a strobe. We did that over on Cuttihunk, 1947. That lighthouse that had been there for a very long time, big lighthouse, keeper's house, stone walls. We had the oil shed, and that was torn down in 1947, and they put a little strobe up.
Well, a lot of that happened in the 50s, because in the
Okay.
50s,
Yes.
not just lighthouses,
Okay.
but everything. Old brick buildings are
Yes.
ugly. We want plastic. We want new. Johnny comes marching home from
Yes.
World War II and from the Korean War.
Okay.
And so it wasn't just the Coast Guard, it was everybody.
Really? In
Oh,
the federal
throughout the-
government, that was just,
Not the federal government, private people.
yes.
And these brick buildings in some of these old town cities up in Maine, say, or even Massachusetts,
Yes.
they would cover the front of the building up with a new plastic
That's
sign
true,
because it
that's
was
true.
modernized.
right.
We want modern. We don't
That's
want
true.
those old brick buildings,
is
which are
true.
gorgeous, of course. I want them. I want keep all of that. I love architecture. So you can't just blame it on the Coast Guard.
But they were accessing lights as well.
Well, we accessed them because
Yes. Explain to the audience what excess is.
okay, well, if the Coast Guard or the Navy or the Air Force or any government entity no longer has a use for the property, they consider it excess to their needs. And there's 2 ways that there's several ways. The main 2 ways that they access property is, if that property was withdrawn from federal land, then it goes to the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, for further disposition or to hold it until some other entity wants it or the government wants to sell it. If it was purchased from Mrs. Brown or Farmer Smith by the government, by the Lighthouse Service or the Coast Guard, and they no longer want it, then it goes to GSA. And then GSA, at the time, GSA will send a flyer around to every government agency saying, do you need this property, air base, light station, whatever. And if in 1 month period, if no federal agency wants to take charge of that, then it goes to the state for the next, that it resides in for the next 11 months. And at the end of a year total, 1 month and 11, if nobody speaks up for that property, And then it is sold to the highest bidder, if in the case of GSA. And we didn't want that to happen. We didn't want something like a lighthouse turned into a McDonald's, or whatever. So in 1999, we introduced through Mikulski, from the senator from Alaska, and Mark Souter from Indiana, who's a lighthouse nut, even though there's only one lighthouse in Indiana, a bill in Congress, and it failed. But the next year, in 2000, it passed. So it's the Lighthouse Preservation Act of 2000, and it changes the rules a little bit. So this helps lighthouses, not totally, but mostly, that lighthouses can now be saved by nonprofits. And but if nobody speaks up for it, then it is sold through GSA in the case of property that was purchased for the government use.
Well, my nonprofit, Vineyard Environmental Research Institute, received the license for the Gayhead, East Chop, and Edgartown Light in 1986. And we did go through the process a little bit like you outlined, but it was much abbreviated because it wasn't formalized yet, like you're talking about in the year 2000 with that new bill. They were just glad that the community, or a local nonprofit tax-exempt organization, wanted to take on and assume the financial responsibility and liability. I had to have a $3 million insurance policy with, was it with the, I forget the name, I think it was Tubbs' name, or I forget, it was in Lloyd's of London. It was a major insurance company. But again, the onus was on us for the grounds and the shell, and they still assumed and maintained the responsibility for the aid.
Yeah, well, that was
the deal.
Yeah, the deal is it's
aid to navigation, meaning the light. So
yeah, well, the lens.
Everyone doesn't understand, are they?
Yeah, the aid to, it could be a fog signal too.
Yes.
But the thing is, it's personnel access, utility access, and arc of visibility. You can't build anything in front of the lighthouse or in front of where the government wants the light to be seen, so you can't put up some odd tower. But anyways, we'd go to Washington, and we all would listen to what headquarters is going to tell, all these great things they're going to do, which they never did. And but at cocktail time, we'd go to the bar, and that's where we got the work done. And we'd tell what we were doing to preserve lighthouses by putting personnel in there, youth hostels. We protect our aids to navigation. We allow public access to the lighthouse, which is very important and very desirable.
Of course.
And also, it encourages people to fix them up, because the Historic Preservation Act of '66 requires any government entity that has a structure that is on the National Register or even eligible for the National Register to maintain it in museum-like condition. Well, the Coast Guard can't even get new ships. How are we going to? We're not in the museum business. So this this helped a lot. But I'd like to talk about the society. Yeah,
well, your society, which you founded, the United States Lighthouse Society, certainly appreciate vision on your part to create the society, see that there was a need to fill that gap between the Coast Guard and the civilians, and to take over and to guide, like you're talking about, guiding Congress, guiding Washington, guiding the Coast Guard with your history, but to guide them in the direction that you have helped with. But also, too, I mean, you saw the Gayhead light when you were a kid, still had the Fresnel in it. We took the Fresnel out in the early 50s when we electrified it. So not everyone had the luxury and opportunity that you had as a boy to see the Fresnel in the Gayhead light, who's alive today. And yet
I'm still pretty well.
You've sprung well beyond that now.
Well, let me tell you how I
to internationally.
I was assistant aides to navigation in San Francisco, in charge of, and then for a while I was chief of the branch as a civilian.
Okay.
Charge of Northern California lighthouses. Yeah. And the most letters that our public affairs kids got from the public, letters and phone calls concern lighthouses. So they came down to my office, and I had all these books that had been sitting there collecting dust back to 1850. And I had files, at least on Northern California lighthouses. So I said, just put it in my in basket and I'll research it. And I started researching it. It's like eating peanuts. The more I got into, the more I enjoyed it, the more I wanted to know about it. And so I put together a talk slideshow. I gave it to one yacht club, and the phone rang off the hook. I had more talks than I knew what to do with. So one day, after about 2 years, I got a letter from the superintendent of Fort Sumter National Monument on the East Coast. I am on the West Coast. And it starts out, I understand you're a lighthouse expert. And I went, moi? Me?
Probably weren't too many back then.
Well, I took it and showed my wife, this guy thinks I'm a lighthouse expert. I'm not an expert.
Yes.
But I managed to answer his question. Yes. And so one night I came home and I said to my wife, you know, Sally, I said, there's a lot of lighthouse fans. I said nuts, but I'll say fans now, I guess. And they really ought to get organized. And if I did it, if I organized it, I would have a quality quarterly magazine, none of this Friends of the Beacon stuff, a mimeograph. And so I came up with an idea that we would put out a quality quarterly magazine. We would create a research library. We have over 3,000 volumes.
Were you thinking nationally at that time, Wayne?
Not at first. It was going to be California.
Okay.
And it's too long a story to get into it. But I asked a few people that ran nonprofits, and they said, I was going to do every other month. They said, you'll kill yourself. Just do quarterly. And don't limit yourself to California.
Very good advice.
We're the Point Reyes Bird Observatory, but we're all over the world.
Yes.
So I made it national, U.S. Lighthouse Society.
Very good.
And I made available a sheet, a legal size sheet of paper saying that we wanted to, in my talks, that we wanted to create this quality quarterly magazine, research library, act as a communication hub for federal, state, local, nonprofits, museums, and people. To put people in touch with people, to tell people where they can get free paint, things like this. And also eventually collect artifacts for a national museum. And all of this stuff has come true. I started my dining room, and then within a couple of years we were in a mom-pop grocery store size building. And then we had the 5th floor in the financial district in San Francisco. I did it for 3 years for no pay, on top of 30 hours a week, on top of 40. And I couldn't do it anymore, and I actually took pay cuts and stuff and quit the Coast Guard a second time. But these sheets that I gave out, somebody in my audience in San Francisco wasn't interested in joining, but they knew Aunt Hattie in Minnesota was, or Uncle Bill in Florida. And at the end of a year, I had 850 pieces. I said, don't send money, just cut off the thing and put your address down, name and address. At the end of a year, I had 850 little sheets of paper that wanted to join a U.S. Lighthouse Society. And I had 2 things that caught my attention. One was a lady that wrote, I sent that in a year ago. Aren't I qualified to be a member? And I had to get my nonprofit. I did it myself. It took 10 months to get that. And then a man in Utah sent me $20, and I sent it back. And I said, I don't have my nonprofit yet. I'll let you know when I do. And he turned around and sent me a letter with $40. And he said, I don't give a damn. It's a great idea. I don't care if you're profit or nonprofit. Keep it.
Good man.
So we were off and running, and my wife was very instrumental, because while I'm working for the Coast Guard, she's running around town to the printers and so on and so forth, taking care of post office stuff.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So it was fun, and it was very focused. I mean, I was eating, going to the Coast Guard, going to the office at night, and I gave my son Wednesday evenings for Christmas, because I never saw him. I let the gutters go, and all that stuff that anybody does.
So there were sacrifices for you to fulfill your vision.
Yeah, but I didn't seem like a sacrifice, because I was wired.
Yes.
Wired. I don't know why she stayed with me. I mean, it was.
Well, she was sharing in the vision.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful vision.
Yeah. Well, she'd share within anything. You know, I could make dirt pies, and she'd share with it.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, a real sweetheart.
Yeah.
Real sweetheart. So after we got going, my members wanted tours. So I never thought of tours. And so I started doing some domestic tours. Maine, we've done Maine for 26 years or more. Outer Banks, West Coast, all over the country. And then they wanted foreign tours. And a man came in to see me. He wanted to do my domestic tours. I said, no, I do it all. I get the hotels, I get the coach, I get the boats if necessary. I outline the food you're going to have. I do the schedule, itinerary, everything. Art, patch. I designed the patch. You get a patch when you go on a tour. And I said, but I need help with foreign tours. So he came, I'll be back in a week. He came back, he said, how about Russia? This is 92. How about Russia? I went, Russia? Oh, I don't know about Russia. Russia. But we did it.
A lot of lighthouses there.
Yeah, there are 450 still manned.
Wow.
And
well, they haven't they haven't modernized in a lot of sections of Russia, especially Siberia.
Of course, it may have changed now, but in early 90s, there was 450. And I made a friend of a captain in the Navy there, and he said, if we automate it, what do we do with the people? There's no jobs. So we went to Russia, and they gave me a choice of St. Petersburg, the Black Sea, or the islands north of Japan. And I picked St. Petersburg because on our foreign tours, I want the food of the country. I want the museums. I want the experience. In Russia, we went to the ballet. We went to the Hermitage. We went to Peter the Great's house.
Awesome.
We had Russian food, too much vodka. They love to pour that stuff down. And in France, we do Paris for a few days. We do the Louvre. We go out to Monet's place.
Awesome.
And Italy, we might go to a winery or cheese making place. In Greece, we went to an olive oil where they made olive oil and stuff.
Awesome.
So we go all over the world, 2-week tours overseas. But I try to make an enjoyable tour with not too long stretches on the bus, that type of thing, and always incorporate a boat trip if it's appropriate to some lighthouse, and then things about the country other than lighthouses, and of course the food of the country.
What's interesting in listening to you, Wayne, these countries and the culture that you share with the people you take on the tours, the changes in government, the changes in technology, all of these changes that take place, but yet the lighthouse remains as an icon and something that reminds us of our connection to the sea, going back to ancient times. Now, you teach a course you were telling me about. Could you share what this course is, this college course that you teach?
Sure. It's it's at the University of North Carolina, Asheville, where I live, and it's part of the university, but it's a senior center, and it's this new OLI, Asheville Lifelong Learning Institute. So a lot of retired people there will teach maybe a professional in photography, and he'll teach a course on photography. I teach a 16-hour course, 2 hours. This year it's going to be 2 hours every Monday for 8 weeks. And it starts back with the pharaohs at Alexandria, Egypt, 280.
Very intriguing.
280 BC. Actually, 300 BC by Ptolemy I, and his son Ptolemy II finished it in 280 BC. So it covers fog signals and light ships and the keeper's life in the 19th century, female lighthouse keepers, architecture, how the lens works, the history of lens and illuminants, the various illuminants used over the years. So it's a pretty comprehensive course. And I enjoy doing it, and every time I teach this course, I learn something. I tell people, any of you, I know you're professionals out there, I'll have 50 people or something in the course, and I'll say, if I'm wrong about something, let me know about it, afterwards, so I can correct myself, because I have history teachers that'll be there and stuff. And it's, but as you talked about, you said, lighthouse, 3/4 of the earth is water. And man, to get places from early on, coming out of Africa, they had to cross streams or rivers or lakes or oceans. And And they needed to find a way to do that. And of course they did it, as we all know, by rafts and so on and so forth. The Vikings came down to the Mediterranean, and they had to navigate. And lighthouses were a way to show the way around
Yes.
dangerous shoals or into a harbor.
Yeah.
Rome had, Ostia, the port of Rome, had a lighthouse to show the mariner at night coming into there. Because going across the Mediterranean, you can't just do it in one day. You're going to include some night in,
Yes.
in that passageway. But I've had people ask me, and reporters, what is it about Lighthouse that so fascinates people? I said, well, I think it's a lot of different things. First of all, the guys out there, first of all, they're located in a beautiful area. I mean, it could be the rocks of Maine or the stretch of sand down in the Carolinas, and it's kind of isolated. And this guy wakes up and he's at work. He doesn't have to commute. Hey, that's pretty cool. And in the 19th century, of course, we have the beautiful Fresnel lenses, and that fascinates people when they see this. If they rotate, the rotating lens and the click-clack of the machinery back in the day. And then there's something religious about it to people. It's the light against that dark, dangerous sea showing the way. They point to the heavens, so some people have a religious connotation with them. It might be the reminder of a wonderful day spent with your loved one, or a weekend, or a honeymoon. If you go along the coast and you go into any card shop or knick-knack shop, you're going to find lighthouse postcards, if there's one in proximity. So it's that. It's the last thing the mariner saw when he was going to sea, and maybe the first thing he saw coming back into land, and probably was, guiding him in. So it's that, those whalers going out for 2 years, and the widow walks you have there, down in Edgartown. The women up there looking out for their loved ones coming back day after day. There's all of that connection with the sea because everything moved. And Alexander Hamilton, who started the lighthouse service in 1789, August 7th, 1789, in the very first Congress, the first Public Works Act, he said to George, I think lighthouses ought to be as free as the air, because up to that time, countries charged light dues for every vessel that came in.
Tonnage, yes.
A tonnage, right, 6 pence or 2 pence or whatever it was, incoming and outgoing. And he thought that this country, and he was right, was going to expand and grow by maritime, by water. And Alexander Hamilton, of course, the next year, he recommended and developed, when he was Secretary of Treasury, he developed the Revenue Cutter Service, which eventually became the Coast Guard. And then they picked up lighthouses in 1939. But he really had a vision, a lot of good visions. It just wasn't a very good shot. Anyways, so we picked up, and the southern states didn't want this. He did it they had to do the Commerce Clause to facilitate commerce. Lighthouses are going to facilitate commerce. Well, there's certain political entities have used the Commerce Clause to facilitate their own ABC of government entity, whether you like it or not. Some people hate it and some people love it.
You're right, the federalization of the lighthouses at that time, and there was so much commerce going from the European shipping and northeastern shipping down to the south, but right before the Civil War, and in that time period, around the Civil War, when they federalized all the lighthouses, there is some...
Well, they federalized them in 1789.
Yeah, in 1789.
Yeah.
But there was something about the people down south thought it was, because we were taking control of private lighthouses, and lighthouses owned by communities and cities.
No, there were 12. No, in 1789, there were 12. There were 11 colonial and one when we were a confederation before we became a country in 1789.
When did they federalize the private lights?
Those are steamboat companies would put lights where the federal didn't have them or where they needed them. In Maine, there are a lot of monuments, they call them, which are really day marks made out of granite or something like that. Those were around. You can have, the federal government didn't take over them. the federal government, even today, there are more private aids to navigation than there are federal.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well,
and
each shop was taken over, I do know
Well,
that.
it was taken over because but they have to go and get permission to take it over. Unless they do what was called the taking clause, which we now know as eminent domain. And the very first eminent domain, at the time called the taking clause, was 1804 on Baker Island in northern Boston Bay.
Yeah.
There's a farmer owned the island, Baker Island, and the Coast Guard Lighthouse Service wanted 10 acres for a lighthouse. They generally it took chunks, about 10 acres. The farmer didn't want to sell it. So the federal government, along with the state, the Massachusetts, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, went out there with lawyers and land surveyors, and they carved out 10 acres. That was the first taking clause.
That was the first taking.
So
okay.
that's also lighthouses caused the taking clause. would have happened.
I think East Shop was under that taking clause.
Well, no, I think the East Shop, I could be wrong on that.
They were bought out?
I think
have to double check.
They bought out. It was a pretty sketchy looking. Part of it is now part of a house right up there on the Chop.
Yeah.
I was in it 2 years ago, and I wrote the article.
Well, the land where the Gayhead Lighthouse was first put in 1799.
Right.
That property was just transferred to the federal government. It wasn't sold per se by the tribe to anyone. It was just all of a sudden it became federal property via the state, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Well, there's buying.
Yes.
There's taking with the Commerce Clause, or now eminent domain, and there's also gifting in the states. And what I want to tell you was in 1789, the states, the federal government said, we will take over all aids to navigation. We're talking buoys, beacons, and pierhead lights, in addition to lighthouses.
Took over everything, yes.
Took over everything. But the states have to cede the land, have to cede these existing lighthouses and other aids to navigation. And the South didn't want to do that. They said, well, they didn't like the Commerce Clause. They said, well, facilitate commerce. You want to facilitate commerce? Build roads, build canals, build a factory. That'll facilitate commerce. And so there was a big thing going on between the senators from the North and the South. And eventually they agreed to it. But it took Rhode Island 5 years before they ceded the Beavertail Lighthouse and its property over to the federal government. So it took several years. By 1800, we had 25 lighthouses, 25 or 26. By 1820, we had 54.
Well, the Gayhead Lake
56.
property, listening to you, Wayne, was ceded by the state to the federal government, and then they built a lighthouse. And it was a wooden lighthouse, octagonal, and then they moved it in 1844. But it was done, like what you're saying, was for commerce, to facilitate commerce, the whaling industry, the number of commercial ships from Europe, which were numbering up to, as some of the estimates we have, as high as 80,000 sailing vessels passing between the Elizabeth Islands and the Gayhead Promontory there, where Devil's Bridge is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what do you think of the Gayhead Light? Our Gayhead Light, and now it's been deassessed. Now it's owned by the town of Gayhead, or Quina. And we've moved it, and that money, over $3.5 million, was raised by the community of Martha's Vineyard. You've seen it as a boy. I mean, this is great history that you have personally with that light. But you saw it as a boy with the Fresnel. You visited the island over the years. You saw it getting close to the edge. What do you think of our efforts now? Everything that's happened, it's been deassessed, owned by the town. The community raised over $3.5 million to move it, and we're going to restore it and do some other improvements. What is your feeling relative to, internationally, you've seen so many things happen with lighthouses. How do we compare on Martha's Vineyard to nationally in the United States and internationally relative to what we've accomplished?
Well, I think the one thing is that you've got a series of lighthouses that you're taking care of. Usually it's one, some local entity has one lighthouse.
Yes.
So this is a bigger undertaking, if you will, a more expensive undertaking, certainly. And it's quite remarkable. It's terrific. Of course, Gay Head isn't the first one that's been moved in recent years. International Chimney Companies.
Cape Hatteras.
And the real tough one was Block Island. That
Really?
was the toughest. It's a brick 3-story duplex with 2 brick wings and an octagon brick tower, all attached.
Oh my.
They picked it up.
Oh my.
They moved it back 350 feet.
Wow.
They moved it sideways 100, and
my
they moved
God.
it back another
Get
100,
out.
and they didn't break a a window or a brick.
Amazing.
That was the toughest.
I'll be
Then
damned.
they moved Cape Cod,
Yes.
or Highlands, they call it.
Yes.
They moved Nauset.
Yes.
They've moved Sanctity Head on Nantucket,
Yeah.
and they've done some other work.
They moved
with-
Cape Hatteras, that 200
and Cape
foot,
Hatteras, yeah.
Cape 200 feet tall.
196 feet.
Yes.
But that's basically a chimney. It's
Yes.
not as difficult as a duplex with 2 wings and an octagon tower attached.
But how are we faring relative to, again, that national, international picture that you have in your mind of lighthouses and communities?
Well, first
how did we do with the relocation of the Gay Head?
Oh, terrific. And the thing is that and not just the island here, with a very complex series of light stations.
We have 5 lighthouses here. We used to have 6, but we have the greatest concentration of lighthouses in a small geographical area that's unmatched anywhere in the world. Such a small geographical area.
Everybody has their. Our lighthouse is the oldest wooden lighthouse painted red by left-handed Norwegians before the Civil War. I mean, who cares? Door County has the most lighthouses for any county. They have
How
a
many?
whole bunch.
How many?
Oh, I'd have to stop and count them, but there's Sherwood Point, there's the Range Lights, there's Canna Island, there's Old Bailey Harbor, there's a new Bailey Harbor Range Lights, there's Eagle Bluff, there's Potawatomi.
But we're talking about in close proximity. Our lighthouses are really close proximity.
It's great. It's great.
Yeah.
Except that, of course.
I like this perspective you give us. Really.
But I'll tell you, Eggertown is not a light station.
Yeah.
At one time it was.
Yes.
It was on piles, and the worms got in there.
Yes.
They built a boardwalk out to it for the keeper, and then the sand accrued around it, and that's why there's a spit out there. And then they brought that down from Ipswich. I think that was the rear range in Ipswich,
Yes.
which was unmanned. And of course, Eggertown was unmanned after 1926 or whenever
Well,
they
38
moved it.
hurricane.
What was it after 38?
Yeah, we had the house there with the keeper in residence until 38, and then we moved the light from Ipswich in 38.
Yeah. But the others were light stations. I mean, we use the word light station because it incorporates all of the ancillary buildings. Might have a boathouse, you have the oil house, keeper's house, assistant keeper's house, and all that stuff. So, this is quite nice. It's quite interesting that I can't think of any other area in the country that has a group of lighthouses. You have a little a family of lighthouses.
Well, behind us here on green screen, that we have that beautiful photo of the Gay Head Light with the area where it used to be, closest to us in the foreground. Then are those tracks that we moved the lighthouse on with a hydraulic system.
They're pushing it very slowly.
Very slowly,
And probably using
they used a hydraulic system.
And they used Procter & Gamble soap to grease the skids.
Oh, I had probably.
They did that on Block Island, the first one, the International Chimney Company, Rick Lors, the president. They didn't want to put oil on it because it would damage the ground, of course. So they used Procter & Gamble. It's good advertisement for Procter & Gamble, but they used liquid soap to push that.
Well, lard would do that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, liquid soap.
Yeah.
It isn't lard.
Well, soap is made out of fat,
sure.
Which is slippery. Well, interesting. So Procter & Gamble soap?
Well, at least they did the first one they did.
Well, probably
so
this
they
one
probably
too.
still do it.
I'll be damned.
Yeah. They're good
What a
people.
little piece of trivia.
Yeah, right.
I'll have to find out if they did use still. I bet you they did.
Yeah, because it worked before, and they
Yes.
moved it on. Remember, they moved it 350, 100, and 100,
Amazing.
and maybe 30 or
Yes.
something like that. Yeah, really fun.
So you travel around the world.
We do. And let me tell you some of
yes.
the things that happened to us.
Yes.
It just blew me away. I contacted the foreign governments in Russia, and the second night we were there, they had us into the Admiralty. And we got off the bus, and I asked the women to wear dresses and the men to wear a coat and tie. And they had side boys saluting us in, and this admiral gets us in a room, Admiral Romanov, and he goes, you're like Columbus, first people see a Russian lighthouse. Not
my
even
God.
Russian people see a Russian
Oh,
lighthouse.
my God.
Skål! and when we went to Ireland, my guide said, the Commissioner of Irish Lights would like your group, 42 people, to come up to the offices in 5 o'clock and tell your people don't eat a big lunch because they're going to have heavy hors d'oeuvres. So I told everybody, and we got up there, beautiful office, all walnut walls with marble fireplace and oil paintings of lighthouses and lightships. And the embassy, a consulate, they don't have an embassy there, the consulate sent a colonel and his wife over, which I didn't know about. And they greeted us, and they had a book of lighthouses for our library, Irish lighthouses. I had a plaque for them. And I'm looking, and there's a bar, and you could have drinks, and I'm looking around, and there's no hors d'oeuvres. There's a few peanuts and things. And after a while, they opened these huge doors, and here's this table with prime rib and salmon,
Oh, my.
sterling silver,
Oh, my.
linen for 42,
my.
plus our guides,
Get
plus
out.
every
Wow.
salt and pepper shaker was a lighthouse.
Oh my.
And the Fastnet Lighthouse
What a hospitality.
was sterling silver
Yeah.
sugar thing. And I told the women, leave your purses outside. I'm kidding, of course. But they just...
A lot of salt and pepper shakers would go disappearing.
they would. Not my people.
No.
But I was kidding.
Maybe they would offer them as keepsakes. That's amazing.
Sterling silver.
What hospitality to extend to
Well,
you.
then we go to
Yeah.
Greece, the
Yeah.
first Greece trip. We had to stop by the naval base because the Navy's in charge of lighthouses there, and they have artifacts in the base. So we went there, and then the Admiral had us in for cocktails and hors d'oeuvres. And the next time we went, our itinerary we have a different itinerary,
All right.
took us by there in the morning. And so he had us in for coffee and tea and sweets and things like that. It's just been amazing. We went to Netherlands the first time. I just got back from our second Netherlands trip, Belgium and Netherlands. And in most of these, I have somebody from the Aids to Navigation office join us for dinner. And these two guys in Netherlands, the two men from the office, they were as tall as a lighthouse. I mean, those people in Netherlands are really tall. So I said to my group, I said, it's kind of appropriate here because now they can just look into the lantern room. They don't have to climb the stairs. Saves a lot of wear and tear, don't you think? Boy, they were tall. Everybody over there is kind of tall. But we've had, one thing I saw, well, two things when you talk about international. One is, in Russia, my friend became a good friend of mine, ended up coming to San Francisco along with a general and an admiral and everything. He said, it's too bad we don't have an organization like yours to save our lighthouses. When we automate them, they had a lightship that was just rusting. We saved a lightship. And then but we were in South Africa. The South African got on the ball, and they fixed up their light stations as they automated them, and they rent them out for for weekend or week vacations.
Yes.
And the money they get from the vacations goes back into the upkeep of the
Perfect.
lighthouse.
Perfect.
I mean, that is just
Revolving fund.
Aria de Capo there or
Yes.
something.
Yes, Wayne.
And they'd put in a hot tub in some of the old keepers' houses.
out.
Yeah, hot tub, or they'd have a
spoiling.
swimming pool.
Oh.
And then they started coming up with their lighthouse wine and other things they could sell to also make money to keep their aids to navigation going. So that was very heartening. I really, and
Very creative.
I've spread the word on that
Yes.
to other countries and so on and so forth. We spread some ideas around, which is what it's all about.
But also, too, the United States Lighthouse Society that you founded and are president of, you have now in place a foundation that's been very successful in raising funds so that you don't touch your principal and you have a cash flow coming from that fund that allows you to do projects. Could you talk about that?
Well, thanks, William, for mentioning that. Yes, I have given money over, when I was day-to-day, I was kind of a czar on the board.
Yeah.
And I gave 5,000 from our society. It wasn't formal, it was just that we were in good shape, so I gave 5 to Spring Point Ledge up in Maine, and 5 to Point Sur in California, and 20,000 to Thomas Point Shoal in Maryland, and so forth, some others. But we've formalized this thing, and we've had some bequests come in. So we've put it in an account that we can't touch except for the money that it generates every year. So right now we don't have a lot we're generating. We get about 20,000 that we can make use of, and we vote on. First of all, my committee looks at first of all, we actually advertise, and that people can come in for grants.
Wonderful.
And then we culled them out, and we ended up with 6 this year, and then we decided on 2 of the 6.
Yes.
So we're giving 10,000 to Sentinel Island in Alaska, and 10,000 to the Toledo Harbor Lighthouse. And that's something that I also wanted to do. It wasn't part of my first 4 criteria, which was the magazine, the library, archives, artifacts, and acting as a national hub for information on lighthouses. But it's something I always had in the back of my mind, and I just like giving money away.
Well,
it's fun.
It's your vision.
You know that, of
well,
course.
your vision, what you've done with it, and the way it's evolved, and the way the world has embraced the United States Lighthouse Society.
Well, I don't know
it's
if
impressive.
the world is
I mean, you're
embraced
talking about all these countries you're visiting, and you're being treated like royalty, by royalty. Very impressive. Very impressive legacy. Now, how can our public, if they want to contact the United States Lighthouse Society, how can we do that?
Well, thank you for asking that, William. I appreciate that. I wasn't really looking for
but if they want to join or get a copy of your quarterly magazine,
well,
maybe go on one of your tours.
Yeah, the tours are fun. The members get along, they're all birders too.
Yes.
And they get along like birds of a feather, so to speak. You know? Our website is USLHS. Now, LH, because back in the 19th century, the Lighthouse Service, lighthouse was hyphenated. So I've kept that, USLHS. USLighthouseSociety.org.
Excellent.
That's it. And everything's on there. We also have on there, for any teachers out there, we have a kindergarten through 4th grade curriculum.
Beautiful.
Which you can download.
Yes.
We may still have, I had them printed up years ago, so you can actually write or call in. Our phone number is 415-362-7255. But go on the website, that's the one that tells you everything you need to know about that. We have restored the Thomas Point Shoal Lighthouse. We have 3 or 4 chapters. And we're working on Hooper Strait Lighthouse. It's a caisson type. Both of those are in Chesapeake Bay. Our headquarters now is in the No Point Lighthouse, which is on Puget Sound. And we've restored the keeper's house, which is also our office. It's a duplex. One side we rent out for weekends or whatever, nonprofit type thing. And then the other side is our offices. And then there's a lighthouse there too, which we're helping to restore. But the big thing we did, I got to tell you this story. The first year, the end of the first year that I had this Lighthouse Society going in my dining room, no Thanksgiving dinner that year. There just wasn't room. But we had word that this man, a very wealthy man, just south of San Francisco, had a lightship, a former Coast Guard lightship, and he wanted to give it away. So now here we are. We had no overhead, no salaries or anything, and I just said to my board, we got to go for that, or it's going to end up in the scrap heap. So they said, well, I don't know, and everything. Well, I convinced them, and I got a friend of mine, a Coast Guard captain, to go down and when he gave it to us and to sail it up into the bay. But first I had to find a place to put it, and I couldn't. Redwood City, California, Humboldt Bay north of us, San Diego. Nobody wanted this lightship where we could tie it up. So I called Oakland finally, and I said, do you have an industrial pier that we can tie up to until we restore this light? The lightship was a rust bucket. I mean, we had to cut off half the stack and re-weld metal and chip and paint. I said, and they said, well, how long do you think it's going to be? And I said, oh, we'll probably restore the ship in about, all volunteers, in about 6 months. Took 19 years.
Oh, my. Oh, my.
But they were very gracious.
Yes.
They let us stay there. They even gave us electricity and water for free.
Oh, wonderful.
And then they finally said, okay, we're putting you over here. We're going to build a special place for you at Jack London Square. And they put in some benches and railings and right next to FDR's yacht.
Well, they were proud to be affiliated with you.
Well,
And to have the historic lightship there.
didn't know how to get rid of us.
Well,
So that was fun.
well, I love this interview, and I love the serendipity of you giving me a call saying, hey, you're on the Vineyard, looking at our gay head light that we just moved, as you see here.
Nice job. Nice.
Yes, thank you.
The work
Yeah.
they're doing around it with the flowers and the landscaping is
yes.
coming along very nicely.
Using a lot of the
Looks good.
material, the indigenous materials that were there. So Wayne Wheeler, president and founder of the United States Lighthouse Society. Thank you for joining us on my talk show, the William Waterway Presents program. And we look forward to staying in contact. Wayne comes to the island all the time. You have his contact information. Maybe next time he's here, you'd like to speak with him and see what the United States Lighthouse Society is doing. Maybe take a tour. But again, thank you for joining us today. And we look forward to keeping you abreast of what's going on with lighthouses on Martha's Vineyard. Thank you.
Thank you, William.
You bet, Wayne.